Good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here once again. And I think since the last 3 years, I always get this opportunity to provide a global perspective on what's going on in livestock sector, in particular when it comes to fulfilling our commitments to climate action. My talk this morning will focus on the progress made in terms of the country commitments, so the nationally determined contributions to reduce methane emissions. But before that, I want just to go through reminding ourselves, what are the numbers? So where are we with methane emissions and progress made in recent submitted national determined contributions? I will talk about policies and what are actions in terms of priority that different countries are taking, and of course the challenges about that. And I will end this presentation by reminding ourselves what FAO is doing to help countries provide direct support on achieving those goals. Recently, 2 years ago, we published this report, which is mainly on pathways to reduce emissions in livestock. And this analysis showed that the emissions from livestock sector globally are about 6.2 gigaton, which represent around 12%. So this is more an updated number on the emissions. But in particular, the challenge is that 54% of those emissions globally are in the form of methane. And actually, when you look at the methane profile, 85% of emissions are just enteric. So it's happening within the rumen of the animals. So therefore, solutions need really to address the challenges. It's a quite huge challenge. And I think seeing this room full today, it's already good, encouraging to show that we are all committed to address these issues. So last year, I talked about those numbers looking at developing versus developed countries. This year, I want to do it differently. So when we look at where the emissions are really happening, so here we have a list of 28 countries that are emitting almost 82% of the total methane emissions globally. So it's happening in a few countries. So this is very important. So we have, if we can really focus on those countries, we can achieve a lot. And the issue, if you can see there, most of the countries are in developing countries, so in non-OECD countries. And a few countries are in OECD countries. And you will see that those countries are taking actions differently, and that's where we really need to work a lot. So why? Because first is the numbers, the methodology we use, the data we use. So far, most countries are using the basic calculation of emissions. So actually, we don't know the true value of emissions in those countries when we look at their national communications, their biennial transparency reports, or mainly their biennial updated reports. So because the methodology is still a problem, the data, of course, some those countries are also using not the same base year. So some are using really all the data to report. So meaning that it's a quite challenge on how we address. So a few countries, the one in red, from OECD, you can also see that some still use only a high tier methodology from IPCC, especially only for cattle. For the rest of animal species, they use tier 1. So there is an ongoing call. This started in 2020, and recently, in Dubai during the COP28, there was a global stock take to see how countries can raise their ambitions. So by really taking very strong policy actions, investments to reduce emissions to keep ourselves within the Paris Agreement. Unfortunately, we are still on the wrong path in terms of our commitment globally. So meaning that more effort are needed. And this year is an important year because most of countries are resubmitting the new nationally determined contributions. So previously, if you look at the NDC submitted by many countries, you will see that in the livestock sector, most countries commit more on resilience and adaptation, with mitigation being a co-benefit. Only 47 countries mention livestock as a way to mitigate emissions, but sometimes most of those countries, they do lack targets and specific measures. So meaning that there is a huge room to improve, which of course goes hand in hand on how those commitments are implemented. So I can see that California is quite a good example, but we want to see many countries implementing and showcasing results on what they achieve in terms of emission reduction. So recently, we had a very important exercise. It was the first time that countries submitted the biennial transparency report. I don't know if most of you know what that means. It means that country requested at least 10 years to improve the methodology, to correct data, and also to increase the capacity in order to report the progress made. So far, we have only 102 countries that submitted those reports, and some of those reports are not showing much in terms of methane reduction in livestock. So we still have many countries, half of them are missing. So meaning that in terms of achieving those goals and really tracking the progress, it's still challenging. And you can see here. So now we are in a new generation of NDC, so what we call NDC 3.0. And this year is the year where all countries will submit a new NDC with a raised ambition. So increasing the commitments, identifying the key priorities across different sectors, including agriculture, will be important. So far, only a few numbers. So 24 countries have submitted the new NDC, and we can see that half of them identified specific mitigation actions in the livestock. One country is really putting much emphasis on feed additives, while other countries are still focusing on livestock management, feed management, animal health and genetics, and other strategies. So a few examples of what's going on. So we see that a couple of region countries are taking action. So in terms of EU methane strategy, although it's not yet implemented, but the strategy is quite clear in terms of emission reduction from livestock. We see, for instance, the ABC Plus. Last year we had the presentation from Brazil talking about the achievement under the ABC Plus strategies. And in Australia, we have the methane reduction in livestock program. We see the first ever methane tax happening in Denmark. And we here, for instance, New Zealand with the commitment, although I understand that the methane policy is not quite adapted, especially for the emission trading schemes. But we see that New Zealand, for example, is leading the way in terms of methane reduction. We see countries like Vietnam having a clear plan on methane reduction, including rice and agriculture. Norway more focusing on emissions from other sectors, but including also livestock. We see more regulation in Latin America, for instance, in Chile and Argentina, especially on carbon neutral certification program. But there is a good news. The good news is that we know more or less how we can reduce emissions. So the technology are there, Actually, I doing a very rough calculation. There is a huge financial opportunities if we reduce 30% of methane globally. This, we are talking about 34 to 60 billion USD in carbon credit. So it's quite a huge potential. So then what we need is to understand better the cost of reducing the 30% globally. So if you look at some instruments, so here I see talking about carbon markets. One way is how countries are doing. So the first slide here is really talking about how countries are putting together taxes as a way to reduce emissions. Although most of those taxes are not directed to the livestock specifically, but you can see in terms of this is the price in USD here is per ton of CO2 equivalent. You see a huge discrepancy in terms of prices, taxes put in the place by different countries, but this is one way, although not always working properly for agriculture, but this is one way of reducing emissions through taxation. So the other way is more the carbon credit. So there are many carbon credit schemes around the world, and with different national prices defined. I believe this is more closer to what I just mentioned, the financial potential of reducing emissions. Although we see a huge discrepancies and variability across the carbon price, which of course may create some issues where some countries, for instance, if you see the price of 1 ton of CO2 equivalent in Indonesia is 45 cents, while the same price, if you go in EU, is more than 61 USD. So that's a huge difference. So meaning that there will be less opportunity for Indonesia to do, for example, insetting, if they want to do the reduced emission nationally, or more opportunities if they trade the emissions with EU, for example. So that's very important to understand in those solutions. So, however, globally we see that carbon markets and carbon, let's say, market-based instruments have been very important in reducing emissions. This is not happening in agriculture specifically, so this is happening across all sectors, but you can see the financial potential of this, and of course that's where a country needs really to seek much more opportunities. And we can see now with the approval of the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, now you see more bilateral partnership and collaboration among countries to exchange mitigation outcomes. So what FAO has been doing? So mobilizing climate finance is important. So FAO has been supporting countries to put together projects and programs with a portfolio of around $1.2 billion mobilized, for example, with GCF, and more with the JEF, for example. So there is opportunity that country can harness to take advantage of the climate finance that is available. I can say that hopefully this year the first ever project on livestock by the GCF will be approved. It is going to the board in June. So let's hope that, finger crossed, because the project we supported personally to put together. So this is very important. So that's bringing us to one important thing. So we cannot achieve the NDC, we cannot achieve emission reduction if we don't have strong MRV. And this is one of, let's say, the weakness we see across different countries. So the MRV are quite weak, meaning that we cannot track the progress we are making. The other important point is more about the mobilization of climate finance, because of course mitigation has costs. We need to make sure that there is enough funding to support farmers, to provide incentives to farmers to take the appropriate action. So it's important also that we align the agendas, development agendas, climate actions, livestock development programs, they should be well aligned. Because if they are not well aligned, usually when it comes to the prioritization by the government, maybe one sector may not, or one action may not be supported because of lack of alignment. So we are also calling to strengthen mainly technical and institutional capacity, both within the government, private sector, philanthropy, and other organizations to ensure that this more institutional capacity enhancement and also collaboration is quite effective in addressing the problem. So we worked with countries, and one way we are doing is really understanding the policy landscape of the country and identifying the key priorities that country can take to integrate more ambitious measures and the target within the NDC. So those are the type of the reports we are putting together for different countries. So far we are working in 15 countries, and the idea is that most of those countries will come up with an NDC where methane will be visible. Because one of the goals is to make sure that in terms of emission reduction, methane is our big elephant in the room. We need to make sure that it's well integrated into the NDCs. And I would say Zimbabwe being a good example where the new NDC that was published recently has integrated already methane reduction among those. So what FAO is also doing is to develop guidelines and methodology and metrics. So we have developed many guidelines that are available out there. They are life cycle, based on life cycle assessment for the livestock sector. They look at the different impact of mitigation options. And we are working with many partners. I see many colleagues here that have contributed to this work. I really thank you so much, and I hope that we will continue to work together to advance the work of the FAO partnership, which is the Livestock Environmental Assessment and the Performance Partnership, which really bring the science on ground to help in addressing all the issues related to the data and also methods and also the trust we have in our emission monitoring program. So I want to finalize this presentation by calling for action. I think the biggest action today is really looking at my 28 countries that I presented at the beginning. So take a commitment, raise ambitions, consider livestock methane reduction within the next NDCs. Also put in place programs, especially to implement. Implementation is important. Only mentioning something in NDC doesn't mean that that will be implemented. So it's more taking action at national level, involving private sector, private finance to help farmers make the difference. And that will pay off. It's also important to make sure that the different solutions, innovation, technology being developed are tested on the ground, including in developing countries. It's where we have more animals. It's where we have farmers with small holders. So we need to make sure that the feeding practices they have are quite aligned with the solutions we are putting on the table. It's also important that we invest in data. So now we are talking about artificial intelligence, access to information, but of course we need to go back to the basics, doing agriculture survey, collecting data from farms, understand how we can tailor the solutions to really match what farmers are doing. It will be important. I want also to finalize this by saying, please involve farmers. Farmers must be at the center of the decision we are making. Because most of us here, we don't own cows, we don't have goats or sheep, but we have the science. But farmers are the one dealing with the animals every day. So we need to make sure that farmers are at the center of the strategy, the solution we are providing. On that, I thank you so much for the invitation. And I want also to take the opportunity to invite you for the second global conference on sustainable livestock transformation that will happen in Rome this year from 28 September to the 1st of October. It will be a largest gathering for the livestock sector. So, and we are looking for innovation, young innovators. If you are interested, so reach out to me. I will give you the information so you can apply, because we want to show that solutions exist and those solutions can be scaled up across the world. So that would be the main objective of that conference. So I all invite you to join us in Rome in September. Thank you so much.